I will sell what I have, give all that I am, to hold this treasure as my own.
Hello and welcome back to another of our Gospel meditations. In Matthew's Gospel, we get the line that after John the Baptist was arrested, Jesus withdrew to Galilee. Now the heat is on around Judea, so he flees up into the hill country of the Galilee. He would have known that territory so well, it's home ground. So he knows where to go. It says in the Gospel that he came back to the village of Capernaum by the sea, the inland lake of Galilee. And from there he would have gone out to preach and sometimes would have come home, possibly to Peter's home, because he wasn't a local of Capernaum. He was over the hills further away in Nazareth. And even to these days you can go to Capernaum, and it's fairly well attested now, the archaeologists would say, that this was always venerated as Peter's house. It's up to my knee, I suppose, in terms of the structure of the place, the walls, pretty pokey. But remember, it's a fisherman's cottage. And I would suspect that in a place like Peter's house, he told parables in the evening as much as he told them by day out around the lake and the countryside.
Jesus spoke to his disciples, "The kingdom of heaven is like treasure hidden in a field, which someone found and hid. Then in his joy, he goes and sells all that he has and buys that field. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant in search of fine pearls. On finding one pearl of great value, he went and sold all that he had and bought it. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a net that was thrown into the sea and caught fish of every kind. When it was full, they drew it ashore, sat down, and put the good into baskets, but threw out the bad. Have you understood all of this? They answered, yes. And he said to them, therefore, every scribe who has been trained for the kingdom of heaven is like a master of a household who brings out of his treasure what is new and what is old. This is the gospel of the Lord.
Countryside parables are easy to pick. The sower goes out into the field. He could have been in a field or on the edge of a field or looking down into the field from one of the hills of the Galilee. And we know that there are domestic parables. The woman who needs the flour in preparation for the bread, and the talk about the leaven that raises the substance of bread and brings it to a product to nourish us. So some of the parables are very much outside, some are inside. Now, why are the inside parables important? It's because possibly the followers of Jesus met in their houses for the breaking of bread. This is after the Lord is gone. They, of course, would have said Jewish prayers over the table with Jesus, a faithful Jewish follower himself. But after the resurrection and their gathering at home, possibly Peter and the crew, they all fled back to Galilee. It's too hot to handle down, or up as they used to say, in Jerusalem. And you get a feel that it is in a home. That lovely line at the end of this book of parables is where Matthew has Jesus say, the wise scribe is like the master of the household. He will draw things old and new out of his treasure chest. Now, just looking at our house here, there's all sorts of bits and pieces of the house. This mug here I picked up when I was in Boston at Harvard University and had a love twice. I had a sabbatical there, and I enjoy those days to have time to read and think and to meet scholars. And so I brought this back from the days in Harvard. There's photos of fond friends. Peter Doherty just lives behind us, and this is from Stockholm, from the place where the Nobel Prizes are awarded. And so being fond of Peter and his work, I just got that there. Because it's a university parish, I picked up somewhere around town just the two figurines of the graduates of the university. And we can go on. They're things that Peter and his wife would have had in their house. Bits and pieces, wouldn't have had photos, they could have had paintings, they could have had objets d'art from the Jewish tradition, you know. But it's because they have things like that around, you get the domestic parables. And why? Because it's back in the houses they meet for the breaking of the bread. And what Matthew wants to do is to get them to feel reassured, because they've come from the synagogue, and there's a synagogue in Capernaum. If you go there today, you can see the synagogue. It's built on the earlier synagogue that was very close to Peter's house, but then there's another synagogue today, a ruin, but it's built on top of the original synagogue. So they weren't going there any longer. Maybe for a while they did, but they gradually broke away. They were gradually not welcome. So there's this whole issue of reassurance. It's the whole milieu of Matthew's Gospel. Don't worry, you've brought the treasures with you. Here in the house we speak the language of the Lord's Supper. Here we recite our Hebrew psalms. You brought the treasures with you. But now it's in this new setting. It's not at the temple or in the synagogue, but you're led here in this house for the breaking of the bread. But also in the Gospel of Matthew, you'll notice that there is also a very strong confrontation, something insisted upon, taking the insight of the parables seriously. No mediocrity. Give it your best. So you get right at the end of the parables, the last one is the very Jewish notion at the end of time. Our God will have to assess or recognize the quality of life we have lived. It's not there to terrorize or to bring guilt and shame. It's there, brought there to say you have within you the capacity to fulfill life, love, forgiveness, kindness, to correct injustices. It's within you. Use it well. Now there we get the pattern of the value of the parables, the ones of growth outside in the field, the one of the woman with the flour in the house. And as they sat in the house for the breaking of bread, with very familiar symbols around them of the household, you get the line, it's like the householder who brings out things old and new from their treasure chest in order that we may live and live well now. So we've come to the end of the book of parables. We move into a new section of Matthew's Gospel next week, and it's in those stories, I recall one coming up's the feeding of the 5,000, and so we move from a teaching moment into a learning moment through gestures and things that are not so much a teaching parable, but are things we touch and move and live by. That'll be in the next section of Matthew's Gospel. So, for today, thank you for sharing. We'll see you next week.
I found a treasure in a field that neither time nor death can steal. I will sell what I have, give all that I am, to hold this treasure as my own.